Okay, good evening, my dear future chartered accountants. So how things going on? How is going concern? Concern is there or concern is going? You're almost towards the end. Okay, Ind AS 116, leases. So this is the standard which is after Ind AS 115. So what does it say? What was the situation of Ind AS 115? How much was the content? This also has got almost similar content. As per the institute material, it has got about 120 pages. And I have just given you the material, it's around 20 pages. One reason, of course, it does not have solution for questions. And of course, I have tried to reduce to the maximum extent possible. We can't go below this. And this is the standard which is first time made applicable for CA final exam. So in the exam May 2020, definitely you can expect one question, is my opinion, because whenever they newly add question or any standard, you will expect that question. So Ind AS 116 is almost guaranteed question for this and subsequent attempts. Okay, Ind AS 116, I hope you know the previous standard was Ind AS 17 leases. Why 17 leases? Because if you look at the 7, just reverse it, it looks like L, or if you make it otherwise, it is 7. Now this 7 is broken down into two parts, 1 and 6. So Ind AS 116 has got so many points, that is to say that they are breaking down every points possible. Okay, we'll get an overview first, then we go to that standard, because unless you get the fundamental impacts, you will not be able to get anything out of this standard. And for that purpose, I hope you remember AS 19 leases, and you had leases in SFM also, no, not in SFM, FM, financial management, in IPCC. New syllabus, it was there. Yeah, leasing was there. In SFM final it is not there because it is part of your IPC syllabus already. But anyway, AS 19, if you remember, you would have classified into two varieties of lease. One is financing, and the other is operating. I'm not sure whether you remember these two names, financing lease and operating lease. Again, you're looking at me like, don't ask the next question, but I will ask. What is the meaning of financing lease? And what is the meaning of operating lease? I'll tell what is operating, which is not financing. And you don't tell financing, which is not operating. That becomes circular reference. It keeps on going around it. What is financing lease? Risk and rewards are substantially transferred. It's almost like a sale. It's not a sale, but almost like a sale. Basic fundamental point was substance over form. Even though in legal terms it is not a sale, because asset might come back, but in substance the benefit is given to the lessee, therefore it is counted almost like a sale. That is what financing lease. That is in the books of lessor or lessee. For both. For both persons we classified. Lessor, I hope you know the meaning of lessor, lessee. And you don't look at me like this two names. Lessor is the person who gives, lessee is the person who receives. That is the fundamental change in these standards. For the lessor, the person who gives the asset, the operating lease, financing lease is continuing. So your problems, questions, illustrations related to lessor continues, no change, assuming that you know it. Lessee, there is a fundamental difference. They are not classified as operating lease and financing lease. They are classified as exempted lease. That is, you don't apply this standard or you apply this standard. Actually, there is no classification as such. Either you apply or you don't apply. If you don't want to apply, there are some exemptions given, conditions given. But if you are not satisfying those conditions, if you are not within those exemptions, then you will have to classify on same basis. No distinction of financing lease and operating lease from lessee point of view. Whether it is 2 years or 20 years, accounting is same. The reason why this point was brought into notice is mainly because if you apply your FM concept, there's something called as fixed assets turnover ratio, where we used to analyze financial statements based on various financial ratios. One of the ratio was this turnover ratio was used for assessing efficiency of the organizations. If fixed asset is 1 rupee and sales is 3 rupees. So that means if this company expands further, they acquire further machinery, further building or any other fixed assets, then they will be able to turn it around and make sales turnover of 3 rupees. And if another company has got same ratio but same amount but ratio is 2, that means they are not so much efficient, because 1 rupee fixed assets, they could generate only 2 rupees sales. And of course, you have to compare it to a similar industry only. You can't compare one hotel industry with one construction industry. Nature of industry is different, business different. And can you tell me why nature of industry is important? Because if you consider things like CA office, how much fixed assets they require? Nothing. Everything they use, either they use articles or they use the client's work. Basically, CA office is there only for you to go on Saturdays, I think. Just to meet up, just to make sure people are there. Apart from that, everything happens on the client place only, or client work, because nature of the work is that. But if you consider a machinery manufacturing company, they need lot of machineries, they need lot of investment. So you can't compare those two. Even though ratio may be less in construction industry or manufacturing, that is the reason for it. You can't really compare it. On a similar basis, you compare companies in the same industry, but one person is owning the asset, other person taking it on lease basis. Who do you think will have a better ratio in using the asset, or better fixed asset ratio? Two companies, company A and B. Company A is owning the assets, company B is renting the assets, taking the asset on rental basis, has purchased the assets. Whose assets turnover ratio will be high? B will be high because their fixed assets will be less. They have not purchased. The fixed assets is not in their balance sheet because it is on rental basis. I know when you own the asset, depreciation comes into P&L account. When you take it on lease or rental basis, rental expense comes into P&L account. Ultimately, profit is stabilized. Both will have similar profits. But the important point is, when you are trying to analyze the efficiency, it gives a different picture. That company B is super efficient because they don't have so much of fixed assets. Still, they are able to generate sales. But that is not right, because they are using the asset but not in the balance sheet. So because of the asset not being in the balance sheet, it may give, or in fact it has given lot of financial analysis inconsistencies. People have thought this company is good, very efficient, you invest in those companies. Actually, they are not making any higher profits because the reason is asset is not in their balance sheet. Financing lease used to come in the balance sheet because financing lease is recognized as asset. But when you take it on operating lease, the asset was not reflected in the balance sheet. These ratios were not proper. When the ratios are not proper, financial analysis is not proper, and financial analysis is not proper, investors are not properly informed. The objective of financial reporting, what is the definition of accounting? What is the main objective? Is to make the statements available so that it helps the users of accounts to make their economic decisions. But if you're reflecting it as an expense not in the balance sheet, then their efficiency is not properly assessed. Therefore, the amendment came in this standard in IFRS, correspondingly in Ind AS. Therefore, what this standard says is, it does not matter what type of lease it is. If the standard applies, you recognize assets as well as liability in the books of lessee. You may not own the asset, you still provide depreciation and you are going to recognize liability. At the end of lease term, both are getting closed. When the lease starts, both gets recognized, and when the lease is terminated, lease is ended, both of them are de-recognized. That is a fundamental principle. Of course, some exemptions are there. In other words, we can say like, for lessor we treat operating lease, financing lease, but for lessee, it is only treating like financing lease. We don't tell it because there is no classification applicable, but the accounting treatment is very similar that what you would apply in financing lease. So that is the fundamental things required for this standard. Lessee is not given the choice to take it to P&L account unless some exemptions are given. You have to recognize the asset. The main purpose was to reflect that entity control the assets. And after all, what is the definition of an asset? Resource control. So this is type of resource control, it should be in your balance sheet. So that is the intention. You recognize asset also, you recognize liability also. You have not made the payment initially, you make the payment over a period of time, you recognize the liability at present value terms. Okay, so keeping that basics, let's go for the standards. What does it apply? When does it apply? It applies from 1/4/2019. We are almost towards the end of 19. That is for the companies who are preparing financial statements. And from exam point of view, May 2020. That is what is applicable onwards. And if you have got the new study material, you would have got this. Did you get any new study material? Again, some of you looking at me like, what is study material? You study material and all is talking about new source. And my questions, whatever I have covered here, are all mostly from institute questions. About 90% from institute question. 1 or 2 questions I have added for our convenience. So when you solve this material, it's as good as solving institute material, but still do solve institute material for 2 reasons. First reason, when you repeat it, you understand. Second reason, you understand the value of our material. Why this is to be read again and again. Again, I am not telling anything new. These are all the same thing what institute has told, same words. Presentation for me is different. Because they just go on continuous sentences after sentences. It's difficult to differentiate for a student to understand. Therefore, I've tried to simplify it. I know this itself is still higher level, but as compared to institute material, using the same material, I've condensed it and given it to you. Furthermore, condense will happen when we look at the charts, which I'll give you the printout later. But for you to understand these charts, you have to understand the content what I have given to you. But for you to appreciate that, you do the institute material also once. Okay, going forward. So it's applicable from 1/4/2019, including sublease. Even sublease is specifically discussed. We'll discuss it later. Some exceptions are there. This was there in AS 19 and in AS 17 also. Certain elements are covered by other standards, so not covered under this. For example, if it's for mineral oil and all, Ind AS 106 will apply. For you, it does not apply. It is not part of your syllabus, but there is one standard like this. Lease of biological assets held by lessee, Ind AS 41, agriculture applies. Service concession arrangements towards the end, Ind AS 115 we discussed, where there is a toll and all, we had taken example. So those parts is discussed by Ind AS 116 and 115. And license of intellectual property granted by lessor. This also we had discussed, when the revenue should be recognized in case of intellectual property given by lessor to lessee. Any idea when it should be recognized? Like a royalty and all we had discussed. When should the revenue be recognized? When the license is transferred or when the revenue is recognized, whichever, when the accrual happened, whichever is dash dash, you figure it out. We had discussed. You go and revise that part at least. Everything don't expect me to tell. Rights held by lessee under licensing of motion pictures and all is covered under intangible assets like franchise and all. So those things are covered, not part of this standard. Basically, intangible assets related leases are not part of this. They are part of intangible assets. Okay. These are exceptions. Mandatorily, they are not covered here. There are some exemptions which are optional in nature, which is what I was talking about this part. That is exempted leases, where the lessee can choose not to apply. And they are short-term lease or low-value items. If it is short-term lease, you can claim this exemption. If it is low-value item, you can claim this exemption. The reason is, what is lease after all? It's a payment made for using the asset, not transferring the asset. So you go to cinema hall, you watch the film for 3 hours. So can you say for 3 hours it was under your control? You paid for the rent. So I'll show for those 3 hours in my books of accounts as my assets. Typical example can be given. You take a cab on rental basis. You're traveling from one place to another place. You're using the asset, therefore you're making the payment towards it. Can you show in your books of accounts as is my car? Definitely not. That is why these exemptions are given. If it is for short-term leases or low-value items, don't try to worry about applying these standards, which are slightly complex in nature. So whichever is main asset used by the enterprise for their business purposes, only that should be coming in the balance sheet. Because again, the reason is the intention of this standard was to reflect whatever the sales happening by using the asset. That should come in the balance sheet, meaning major assets. That's why they said if it is low value item or short term leases, those things you can need not apply this standard, which you can just show it as expense directly in P&L account. And for those short term lease, short means how much short? What is the definition of short? For somebody who is writing the exams yearly once, 1 year may be short. For who exam were writing for CA people, 6 months might be short. When you're crossing the road, 1 minute may be short. Or if you're running 100-meter race, a fraction of second may be short. So the short definition is to be given. So the standard provides that short means less than 12 months, including renewal if any. That is, if you enter into a rental agreement or lease agreement for let's say 8 months, this standard don't apply, short-term lease. But this agreement provides an option to renew for 4 months. Now will it, okay, for 5 months, exactly, 5 months. Now will this be included or not? Because our CAs are all very much capable of playing with these words and all these sections. So standard don't apply for 12 months. You do one thing, in the agreement you make a modification. Show it as first 8 months, then next 5 months, so that the standard don't apply. You are the kind of person who gave all these advices. So the standard says, you please consider the renewal if it is reasonably certain that that will be exercised. If you are almost sure that renewal will happen depending on the terms, then you consider that also. It becomes 13. So exemption don't apply. If this is not likely to happen based on the past experience and all, then you don't consider this. This exemption will apply. So the standard don't give the rules. They only provide the principles. And we have to have a more discussion regarding the lease term. That we'll have it separately later. But as of now, remember, less than 12 months is short term in nature. You need not apply this lease. Lessee, correct. No question of long term for lesser. That's the basics, no? For lesser, either it is operating lease or financing lease. No question of exempted or not. The exemption is only applicable for lessee. It is not even talked about lesser. Lesser, either it is financing lease, usually for long term. If it is not long term, it becomes operating lease. So that is a straightforward thing for lesser. And will not apply if subsequently become less than 12 months. That is, once you say that it is 18 months, and after 12 months you say that I'm going to cancel or I'm getting reduced. That is, reassessment will not be reclassified into short term. You continue to apply the way you are accounting it earlier. Applies for class of assets. Class of assets, hope you remember this term we have used somewhere in PP in day 16 for presentation as well as for revaluation purpose. Same logic applies. If the nature of the assets is similar purpose use, similar characteristics, then all of them should be applied same rule. You can't say that for this type of assets, for this lease agreement of the furniture, I apply exemption. For the same furniture from different person, I don't apply this exemption. You can't have these inconsistencies. You have to apply it on class by class assets. Office equipments I'll apply. Furniture I don't apply, or some construction equipments I don't apply. You need to classify the assets into different categories, and accordingly you apply the exemption or choose not to apply the exemption. Okay, now coming to low value items. Low value is not defined, whether less than 10,000, less than 50,000. So it's mostly related to the materiality aspects, depending on the judgments. But the standard gives you two conditions to be satisfied if you want to classify it as low value assets. Lessee benefits on its own or readily available resources. Have you seen these words somewhere? Lessee can benefit on its own or readily available resources. It was there in Ind AS 115 when we talked about step 5. You were looking at, sir, 5 steps was there? That was the last step, which they said when revenue to be recognized, there were two methods, proportionate, for our reference, we call proportionate method and complete method. For you to recognize, do you remember that term? They don't use the word proportionate method. We used it for our convenience. No, that is method of accounting, but recognition of proportionate basis, the standard used one particular terminology. Transfer of control point in time or over a period of time. IT or OT, that's what we discussed. Good, you have got a very good memory. Exam is still far away. So you have enough time to forget this also. There we had three points for you to classify it as transfer of control over a period of time. Then one of them was this: lessee can benefit on its own or readily available resources, meaning he is not dependent on anybody else. He can make use of the asset directly. So basically that is not connected with another, and these terms were also there, not independent and not highly integrated. These terms were also there in one more place regarding a discussion during performance obligations, whether they are same or separate. These terms were there also. So not dependent or highly integrated, we did discuss the examples of ERP and all. If the installation software is there, updates are there, should we consider same or separate obligation for that thing? That is, if it is independent, then only they become low value assets. If they are dependent, then they becomes not a low value assets. So you say that you are purchasing one or you are getting one machinery on lease basis for 10 years. Will this exemption apply? Exemption don't apply. So what does CA mindset will tell? Machine don't apply. Do one thing, write separate lease agreement for small parts. Part A of machine, okay, one lease agreement. Part A, low value items, no, it becomes small number. But when they are not capable of independent thing, then it becomes still not a low value asset, not qualifying. That is only when they are independent. That is why they use these 2 points: not integrated, not dependent, and lessee can make use of it independently. If you are in a position to make use of it independently, then you can call it as a low value asset. Like if you are taking a car, car is a high value item, so what do? Divide this into small parts. For tire so much, for wheel so much, separate for engine so much, for seats you can divide into small parts and say low value items. They are not capable of being used independently. Generally, I know you can make use it for any purpose, but in general the purpose for which that asset is taken, therefore they will not be classified as low value assets and apply for lease by lease basis. This point is slightly different. For a short term lease it was for class of assets, but for low value exemption you can choose for every lease separately, because the low value items depends for every lease separately. Therefore here you can't put the restriction of class of assets, it depends on individual lease. The intention of this exemption is cover high in volume but low in values. That is, if you take an example of, okay, you are getting lease of various, let's say, computer equipments or computer peripherals. You buy 100, 200, not buy, you take it on lease. So individually they are small, but together they are high. So if you take it on individual basis, they are less. So lease by lease basis, you can claim it. So when the value of the items individually are very small, you don't have to account for the big accounting. You can go for exemption and transfer it to P&L account as expense. And value, when the asset is new, you should ignore the age. That is to say, you are purchasing one car, you're taking assets of car on lease, and this has got a very low value item because it is almost on the towards the end, scrap value, very small amount, 10,000 or something. You can't still classify it as low value item. So when you decide low value, high value, don't decide on present condition of the asset. You should decide on the content of the asset. That is, when the car is new, afresh, what would be its value, high or low. So towards the end of the asset, any asset for that matter becomes scrap value, asset value will be less. So when you decide the low value items, it should not be based on the age. At present, it is asset available in its original condition. What would be its value? Depending on that, you can classify. And head lease don't apply in case of sublease. Sublease means you take the asset on lease and you give the asset on lease. Both comes and goes. So when you are giving the asset on lease, this what comes in cannot be low value, or even for that matter cannot be short term lease. The reason is you are accounting two leases itself. So you can't account for one lease as expense and other I'll give it on lease basis. The moment you take giving on lease, receiving also should be the standard to be applied. You can't apply this standard proportionately. Therefore, if you are taking the asset on lease and giving the asset on lease, this exemption don't apply for the asset which is received. We will discuss the sublease later. And for these things, short-term lease and low-value items, accounting is you recognize the expense or on straight line basis or on any other pattern reflecting benefits. Straight line basis means if you pay, let's say, 1 lakh and 3 lakh over a period of 2 years, low value assets, you can divide 3 lakh plus 1 lakh divided by 2 lakh per annum. Straight line basis or any other benefit. First year I get more benefits, so I'll recognize more. Second year I get more less benefits, I recognize less. So don't recognize whatever the payments done. You go for whatever the benefit received. So either on straight line basis or based on the benefits received. But ultimately it will be recognized as expense in the lease term. That is when this basic optional exemption is applicable. Let us take some problems based on that. Question number 1. Page 23, I think. Question. You know, middle, extra middle is there somewhere? Is there? Got it? Yeah, material is there. Labor will put and every result is over its costing is maintained. Question number 1. A Limited lessee enters into lease with B Limited a 9-month non-cancelable term with an option to extend the lease for 4 months. 9 months is the lease term, but there is an option to extend for 4 months. So obviously the question will be around, should I consider this 4 or not? The lease does not have purchase option. At the lease commencement date, lessee is reasonably certain to exercise the extension option because monthly lease payments during the extension period are significantly below market rates. Whether the lessee can take short-term exemption in accordance with Ind AS 116. So original term 9 months and renewal and reasonably certain that he is going to exercise. Therefore, you will have to consider 4 months, which is total 13 months crossing 12 months. Lessee cannot take short-term exemption in accordance with Ind AS 115. So original term 9 months plus renewal 4 months, reasonably expected 13 months. So lessee can't account as short term lease. Next, assume the same facts as in the previous problem, except at the lease commencement date, the lessee is not reasonably certain to exercise the extension option because monthly lease payments during the optional extension period are what lessee expects to be market rates, and there are no other factors that could make exercise of the renewal option reasonably certain. Will your answer be different in this case? It will be different. So it is a lease term less than 12 months. So lessee, again don't tell lessee should account and all. Lessee can choose the option. So may account as short-term lease because that renewal period is not reasonably certain. That is most likely may not happen. So it's like telling you come to some city for writing the CA exam preparation. Your exam is in 6 months time. So would you like to classify it as short-term lease, or I mean this short-term exemption will you apply or not? Depends on whether it is reasonably certain that you will extend or not. Depending on that, you classify as short-term or don't use that option. Okay. Going further, now let's come to the definition of lease, meaning of lease as per the standard. The basic meaning is, it is to convey the use of assets without ownership. Without ownership, because if it is with ownership, that becomes sales and purchase. 115 comes for sale, purchase is in day 16 or inventory, whatever maybe. So without ownership, and asset should be there. That is, if there is a contract between a company and an accounting firm to provide accounting service, security service, law service, those things are not part of lease. It has to be a asset. And it should convey use of the asset. Just giving the asset is not sufficient. The entity which is receiving the asset, lessee, should use the assets. Then only you will classify it as lease. That is, you are coming to classes. Let's say you come for class for 1 year. I mean, for you it is not applicable. For normal other students, I'm telling, 1 year, maybe more than 1 year, 3 years. And in some universities, they will have lifetime students also there. So in those cases, will you come to the class and can you use the assets, furniture? You are using the asset, no? You are sitting on it, means you are using one. But do you have the control how to make use of the asset? You can't decide, okay, this is my place, give it to me. You can't have those kind of things. So it does not use really the convey the use, even though you are using it, but the right to control is not within your points. So the standard says it has to be an asset, it has to be a use, and right to use. Specifically, they use this term throughout the standard. ROU, right of use. This term is used throughout the standard, ROU, right of use. So basically, control is what we are trying to understand. Okay, when at inception, when should you account it as lease? At the time of inception. What is inception? At commencement, but in standard they say commencement is different, inception is different. So we have to understand. So what is inception, what is commencement? At inception you should do it. Inception means earlier of the lease agreement date or the date of commitment by both parties. Effectively when the lease agreement comes into picture. The lease agreement date might start later, but earlier only you have committed, not in terms of legal terms, but through mails, through discussion, through negotiations, that from this day onwards we are going to use the asset. So whichever is earlier, you have to account it as lease. Because the standard itself is based on the concept of substance over form. So you don't have to wait till actually the lease agreement is executed. The moment you are going to occupy the asset, building, or take the assets and start making use of it, or not even using it, you are just committing for the use. It becomes inception. Basically, the moment when you decide that lease will happen, that is the point in which you have to classify it as, you have to recognize it as lease. Okay, definition. It's a contract or a part of a contract that conveys the right to control, not only use, but to control the use of the identified asset. Please understand there's difference between using the asset versus right to control the using the assets. Same example, you are using the asset now in the class, but you don't have the control how to make use of the asset. You just use for a certain period of time. So we are not talking about use, we talk about right to control use. And that's one of the important difference between existing standard AS 19 in AS 17. They were using the word right to use, but here they use the word right to control the use for a period of time in exchange for consideration. For a period of time means that is what we call it as lease term. For a consideration means that is what we call it as lease payments, amount paid by lessee to lessor. Okay. Let us look at these definitions slightly more detail. So ultimately, who controls? Is it the customer, means supplier? Customer is nothing but lessee, the person who receives. Supplier, lessor. Why you are not using the word lessor, lessee? Why should I use the word customer, supplier? Sir, you are using the word. You should tell why it is. Now the reason is we are deciding whether they are lessee or not lessor. Whether there is a lease or not. So before we decide, we call them as lessors or lessees. So we are using the term customer or supplier. But ultimately for your understanding, you can think like a lessor, lessee. But it is before deciding whether lease exists or not. That is why this term. person who provides the asset, supplier; person who receives the asset, customer. So ultimate principle is who will direct the use. If customer is directing the use, the receiver is directing the use, then customer is the owner of the asset. I mean, not the owner of the asset, that means lease exists. If supplier direct the use, lease don't apply. That is, it is not coming into the hands of lessee for him to make use of it according to his intentions and purpose. So when lessee cannot use it, when he don't have the control, lease did not happen, this standard don't apply. That is this point. And it has to be identified asset. Asset may be explicitly specified or implicitly specified. Explicitly specified means you say that part number 10 to 15, specifically you say it. This part of the asset is leased out. Or you can say that periodically we will give him 5 units for the usage. That may not be specific but general. For example, if you're thinking of a warehouse, cold storage, in maybe customs or something, or customs, what do you call him, CHF or something, CHA, custom clearing house agent, clearing house, I don't know, some name you provide, I don't know the GST and all, so you would come across in custom GST there, but clearing house agent, that's what it means. A person provides one more service, that is, before the goods are cleared, he keeps in his warehouse and he charges you for it. And you are having a continuous transport, so you have made an agreement with him that he need to provide you the warehouse for certain period of time. And that agreement is long term, so no exemption apply. And he does not say in his cold storage which fridge exactly you need to put the goods. You give the goods, he will have to keep it there. Where exactly it is not there. So it need not be explicitly specified. Agreement is you are using his asset, but which part of the asset is not specified. Therefore, it may be explicitly specified or implicitly specified. Both are part of it, but there has to be a specification. You can't say that I may give you this cold storage or I may give you one more service. You can't say that the asset itself is not clearly defined. The asset, exact part, exact content may not be defined, but asset must be there. You can't say that I will create the asset later, then you use the asset. Asset must be in existence. And this is one important condition. Substantive substitution right. I use SSR as short form. Substantive rights. Again, have you heard of this somewhere? Rights, opposite of left or wrong somewhere. Substantive rights is the term we used in consolidation. Whether should we consider potential shares or not for the purpose of assessing control, significant influence for everything. Substantive means you get the rights, you get the control later. Protective means you make it only as a safety measure. That is, you say that the asset is transferred from one to another. If it is damaged, you put a restriction, you can't overuse it. Just because I have given the lease to you, you can't use it so much that you can't go beyond certain limits, certain capacity. Because if you do, the machine or the asset gets damaged. So they will put some restrictions. Just because they put restriction does not mean that the asset is not transferred yet. So even you take asset on lease or building, rent, the owner will tell you, landlord will tell you that you can't use this, you can't put lot of nails into your house, and you can't make these physical changes and all. They put some restriction so that their asset is protected. And for those things, we don't call them as substantive rights. Substantive rights means they will tell you, before you open this room, please talk to me first. Before, I will give you all this furniture, fridge for your use. But before you start putting something into fridge, please speak to me first. Before you sit on the furniture, get my permission. I'm giving the asset to you, you are using it, but the control is not with you, control is with me still. That means, again, in such cases, the standard don't apply. That's what this means, substantive substitution right. Okay, substitution means similar rights, but whether he can take the asset back and put it as new asset. If the supplier has substantial substitution rights, then Ind AS 116 don't apply. One more example we'll take for the substitution method. A company is having an agreement with the cab company to provide the cars for employees if they are working beyond certain time. Not applicable for you, don't worry. I'm talking about regular humans and regular people. This policy exists, especially for women employees and all. They have to maintain that other safety measures are there. And even for others, if you work beyond 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, they will provide the cab service. Now, agreement with the cab company to get the car service, will it amount to lease? The answer is no, because the car, which car comes to you, or whether the car is this nature, that nature, which car number and all, you can't decide. The cab service company will decide. So they will send one cab, you can make use of the asset for that period of time. But on the other hand, if you have an agreement that I need this car only, you have taken one car only for long-term purpose, it may be trucks or it may be lorries or train for certain matters, for certain reasons. If you take one car specifically, okay, you have taken one tempo traveler or one bus for your usage, dedicated use, it will be in your factory only. Then what will happen to that? That is called as lease agreement. Because there, the supplier cannot substitute whenever he wants, because it is under the control of the lessee. It is given to him, he make use of it. If something repair to be done and all, you substitute it. They are protective rights again. Those things we don't talk about it. Ultimately, single point of principle, who controls the assets? Substitution right is there means supplier controls the asset, lesser. This standard don't apply. If substitution right is not there, that means the lessee will use the asset. This standard applies. That's a fundamental principle. And should have sufficient information to conclude that you have substitution right, because asset belongs to the supplier. He should have sufficient information. It's like you can't just say that, okay, in general I will say I have substitution right. You can't make an open statement. You need to have a conclusive evidence to prove that you have substitution rights. Okay. Customer generally assumes that the supplier don't have the SSR. That is, customer need not perform investigation as to understand who controls the assets. On the prima facie, if he will assume the control is with the lessee only. That is, I have taken the asset, it is with my control, I use the assets. That is prima facie that you need to do. You don't have to go for in depth, in details, that whether he really controls the asset or not. On the prima facie, on the face of it, if it is with the control of the customer, this standard applies. He don't have to go for detailed investigation, whereas supplier should do it because it is ultimately his asset. Okay, so two conditions are specified. I've given you the principle. For you to say there is substantive substitution right, it should be practically possible to substitute, and by substituting it, he gets the benefit, the supplier gets the benefit. For example, again cab service example, and there is no specific terms of the agreement says this particular car is only given to them. But you have a practice of using the same car. You have dedicated one car towards it, and you are not expected to change it. So there is no practicability of substituting the asset with new assets. You can still say there is a lease agreement. On the other hand, you take one machinery being installed in his premises, for example, IT equipment services. So all the network equipments, softwares are installed in your company, and it is taken care by other person there. You are having the asset. You did not tell the person you use this network, this quality of the cable. You don't specify it. But on the other hand, he cannot take away whenever he wants. IT equipments are installed. Next day, he can't come and say, no, it is mine, I'll take mine and go. It's not like the way what you used to play cricket in your childhood. One person used to get ball, one person used to get wickets, one person bat, and you say that after the match is over, after you got out, it is my bat, I'll take my and go. You, you can't do such things here because network equipments are installed, assets are installed, then he cannot take it back. That is, practically it's not possible to take it out. Practically it's not possible to substitute. If it is possible to substitute, supplier has got this right. This standard don't apply. And the benefit should exceed the cost. That is, by doing so, his activity should substantiate that this substitution will benefit him. You can't just say that just to prove it is mine, I have the right, I'll take away. But if you take away those, you lose. The cost of removal, cost of substitution is more than the benefit you receive. In such case also, this substitution right don't exist. Ultimate principle is who has the control, and we are not going by the legal terms or legal conditions here. Ultimately, whether it is expected that customer will control or the supplier will control. That is the fundamental principle. And when not substantive, substitute after a particular event. That is to say that after making sure the asset is used for 3 years, and then I will substitute. If the asset is not in proper working condition, I will substitute. If the asset is not in working condition, you have to substitute. It's not that you can substitute. Then why will other person pay lease payments to you? You have to take it out and give the new asset. Those things are not called as substantive rights. They are common rights. And please don't consider the any factors which will arise after this date on which you classify it as lease. So agreement entered by a future customer, new technology or market price fluctuations, those things you don't consider for assessing whether you have substitution right or not. The substitution right should be just attributable to these 2 points. The supplier should be capable of taking it out and give the new asset, and he should have benefit from doing it so. Okay, other points are there, but we'll discuss problems related to this before we go for other points. Question number 3. Scenario A. Electronic data storage provider, supplier, provides services through centralized data center that involve the use of specified server number 10. The supplier maintains many identical servers in a single accessible location and determines at inception of the contract that it is permitted to and can easily substitute another server without customer's consent. Without customer consent throughout the period of use. Further, supplier would benefit economically from substituting an alternative. Would benefit economically from substituting an alternative because doing this would allow the supplier to optimize the performance of this network at a nominal cost. In addition, supplier has made clear that it has negotiated this right of substitution as important right in the arrangement, meaning it is explicit. And the substitution right affected the price of the agreement, whether substitution rights are substantive, whether there is identified assets. So here, do we have SSR? I mean, do the supplier has SSR here? They have, I mean, they are practically possible to substitute. They have mentioned it in the agreement, and also they have got the economic benefit out of it. Therefore, the customer does not have the right to use the identified asset. This standard don't apply in this case. The lease part don't apply. So you can say that in situation A, substantive substitution rights or substantive substitution rights lies with the supplier. Because the 2 points what we need to mention, it is practically possible to substitute and supplier would benefit from such substitution. Hence, Ind AS 116 don't apply. Now, let's come to situation B. Assume the same facts in scenario A, except server 10 is customized and the supplier does not have the practical ability to use the customized asset throughout the period of use. Additionally, it is unclear whether the supplier would benefit economically from sourcing a similar alternative asset, whether substitution rights are substantive and whether there is an identified asset. In both cases, there is an identified asset because servers are very, very specific. In one case, server number 10, other case also number 10. Both are very, very explicitly stated. But in the second case, it's a customized asset and unclear whether supplier would benefit economically. When you're not very sure, the customer need not do investigations. When it is not on the face of it, it is not with the supplier, you can presume to have been under your control. This standard applies. So again, same reason, supplier don't have practical ability to substitute and no further evidence of benefit. It's substantive substitution rights don't lie with supplier and Ind AS 116 applies. Situation B. Okay, next. Other points continued. Identified assets we discussed, it should be physically distinct, either entire asset or portion of an asset. Portion of an asset means, I given the example of that warehouse only, it need not be the entire warehouse. Within particular cold storage, one shelf is given dedicated for somebody else. That is also will be accounted as lease. Of course, if it is a low value item, you ignore it, but if it is high value item, you will consider it. So it may not be entire asset, it may be even a portion of an asset. That is also accepted. And there has to be a right to control. That's what we have been discussing so far. Control is an important factor, and it need not be specifically mentioned. It may be for a portion of the term also. It might say that it is like in a supermarket. You say that this shelf has to be given to me during festival seasons. This month, this month, this month. You are specifically telling for these periods it is for me. So it need not be entire asset, it can be part of the asset, and part of the asset also may not be continuous in nature. It can be for a specified terms. That is also fine. That is also accepted as lease. So right to control may be for a portion of the term or for the entire term. That's what this point means. Two conditions satisfied. To be satisfied, if you say you have control, obtain substantially the economic benefits from the assets. Obtain substantial benefits means if you have a benefit, when you use the asset, you should get the benefit. If you are having machinery, you might produce goods. Goods are belonging to lessee. Or you might be having the right to sublease or any other cash flow for that matter associated with lease, that is with the asset, should be accruing to the lessee for you to say it is control. Basically, whoever gets the benefit, that person becomes the controller of the asset. And not only the benefit, but also you should have right to use the assets. That's what I've given the example earlier. The furniture, you are using the asset, you get the benefit, but you don't have the right to use the assets for every period of time. Control is not within you. The right to direct the use, how the asset must be used, must be within the control of lessee for you to apply the standard. Basic principle, whoever has got the right for which the purpose of asset to be used, that person becomes the owner, or that person becomes the controller. So let's say you are taken building on lease, and before you make any changes to building, that is if you want to do repairs, any painting, any structural changes, you need to take the permission of the landlord. So who has the right to use the assets? Not the landlord, still the person who occupy, because they are all small rights. But before you making use of the assets, that is before you make every entry, you need to take approval. And that case, it becomes right with the supplier itself. Like if you say that this network equipment, I'm installing it, but before you switch on this equipment, you need to take my permission. That is, and before, okay, I'll give this machinery to you, but before you decide how many units to be produced, you need to have a discussion with me. That is how the asset is used. If it requires the consent, approval, control of the supplier, then customer don't have the right to use. So it's not only about that using, it's right to use. That is a basic principle, depends on who is operated by customer or supplier's personnel. That is, if you take a car on lease, truck on lease purposes, it will be with you only. So either you drive the asset or the person who is giving you the truck will give you driver also, because you are not expected to drive on your own every time. The driver will be given by the supplier only. So either operated by the customer or the supplier's personnel, like an example of driver, that is still considered. Okay, this is important. If the purpose of use is predetermined, that is how this asset is used. Let's say there is a machinery, and this machinery is to produce 1000 units only, and it has to be produced in daily, it has to be produced daily only 300 units. It has to be operated between 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock. That is entire the operations of the use of the asset is predetermined. Then whether it will be with the supplier or customer, what do you think? If the use is predetermined, we have already decided in the agreement only, it has to be used for this purpose, for this time period of time, it has to produce only so much of units. We don't decide. You have to first understand who decides that. It is predetermined, correct. But what if this predetermination condition is fixed by the lessee himself, the customer himself? It is according to his use that, okay, that for me, I want like this, I have structured the content like this, therefore let's make lease agreement also like that. So therefore, just because predetermined, you don't come to conclusion. You decide who will predetermine this, as per whose condition. That's what this says. If customer have the right to operate without supplier instructions, it might say you are taking a car for a period of, let's say, 3-year lease, and the condition is monthly kilometer should be not crossing 1000. Use is predetermined. You can't cross 1000. But when to use the car or when not to use the car is with the control of the supplier, the customer. He can decide when to run, when not to run. Therefore, if customer have the right to operate, then it is with the customer. That is, this standard applies. On the other hand, if supplier decides whenever you want a car, you tell me, I will give it to you. That is, he decides when car comes, which car comes, then it is with the supplier. One more point, if customer design how the asset should be used, customer design how the asset should be used means this asset is to be used for producing goods. This asset, this month, I will not use it because I'm not going to produce these goods. Or I will say this asset, I'm going to use it for different purpose now. I'll produce different type of units. How this asset should be used, the design, if it is determined by the customer, still customer has the rights. Ultimate point is who controls. And for you to remember the point, the word, technical word is who will have the right to direct the use. Basic principle, who will decide the purpose, and in case if it is predetermined, whether customer can operate or customer has actually designed the product, that will determine who will control the asset. Okay, on these points, especially this right to control, let us take some problems. Question number 4. Scenario A, customer XYZ enters into 10-year contract with supplier ABC. So ABC is the supplier who is giving the asset to XYZ. Therefore, ABC is potential lessor, XYZ may be potential lessee. Customer is XYZ, ABC supplier. A 10-year contract with supplier ABC for the right to transport oil from India to Bangladesh through suppliers ABC's pipeline. The contract provides that the customer XYZ will have the right to use of 95% of the pipeline's capacity throughout the terms of the arrangement, whether there is an identified assets. When I say identified asset, it has to be substantial portion, either the entire asset or substantial portion of the part of the asset. 95% is substantial. Whether there is an identifiable asset, yes. Assume the same facts in scenario A, except that the customer XYZ has right to use 65% of the pipeline capacity throughout the terms of arrangement, whether there is an identified asset. 65% of the capacity is not substantial. Again, you can't define what is substantial percentage exactly, but definitely you can say 95 is almost, 65 is not substantial in nature. Therefore, in the first case, there is an identified asset. In the second case, there is no identified asset. Let us write down the 10 sentences. So scenario A, the capacity of pipeline is identified asset since it represents substantial portion of the asset. Scenario B, situation B. Customer don't have the right to obtain substantial economic benefits. And hence there is no identified asset. Next, ABC Limited enters into contract with XYZ Limited, which grants ABC the exclusive right to use a specific grain storage facility over a period of 5 years in the month of May and June. During these months, ABC Limited has right to decide which crops are placed in storage, when to remove them. XYZ Limited provides the loading and unloading services for the warehouse activities. During the other 10 months each year, XYZ Limited has the right to determine how the warehouse will be used. Which party has the right to control the use of identified assets during the period of use? So do you think ABC Limited has the right over the assets? Yes, for a period of May and June, because for these 2 months they decide what crops to put in, when to put it out, how much to put in. Complete control is with ABC Limited. For those 2 periods, those 2 months, the right of control lies with ABC Limited, remaining 10 months with the suppliers. So we can say that for the months May and June, right to control is with ABC. For remaining months, right to control is with XYZ. Next. Sorry. You have to account for only 2 months. Whatever the only 2 months, you'll account it as lease payments. Only 2 months payments, whatever the amount payable. No, only if it is 2 months we don't take it. But if it is over a period of 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, that also is a long term. But in general, whether you have the right of control, you have. The remaining factors of course will apply. If it is short term, then exemption applies. You don't have to go for this part. Company MNO enters into 15-year contract with power company PQR to purchase all the electricity produced by new solar farm. So PQR Limited is the seller, I think. They produce, and MNO company MNO is going to purchase. So PQR is the seller, basically produce, and MNO purchase. They are the buyers. PQR owns the solar farm. They own the solar farm and will receive tax credit relating to the construction and the ownership of the solar farm, and MNO will receive the renewable energy credits that accrue from the use of solar farm. Who has the right to substantial benefits from the solar farm? PQR Limited owns, and they will receive tax credits. They produce, and MNO Limited will receive renewable energy credits that accrue from the use of the firm. So who will get the benefit? Ultimately, who is the beneficiary of this product? Ultimate producer is PQR, but that has to be given to MNO. So MNO is more like, I mean, MNO arrangement is more like a outsourcing they have done. Instead of they are producing it, they are getting produced from PQR. PQR owns the solar farm. Therefore, even though they are the owners, I mean, they can be the legal owners, that is a different aspect, but who has the right to control is what we are trying to account. And they get the tax credits relating to ownership of solar farm. So we are talking about the benefit of using the asset. The economic benefit of using the asset lies with MNO. Even though PQR is the producer, the actual beneficiary of the product is MNO, and not only that, they also will receive the renewable energy credits that accrue from the use of solar farm. So basically, MNO is having the right of control over the asset. How the asset should be used, how many units to be produced, and after producing, what will happen to those products. So ultimately, the economic benefits lies with company MNO, not with the owner PQR. Therefore, you need to account it as lease. To purchase all of the electricity produced by new solar farm. So whatever that asset produces ultimately is given to MNO. So PQR don't have any other control. They just own the asset, but all the operations are controlled by MNO only, basically, because it's for their benefit. When to produce, how much to produce, all of the electricity produced by new solar farm is with MNO. Not only all, even if it's substantial with them, it's still considered as control is substantial with related to MNO Limited. Therefore, we'll say the owner is PQR, he will account it as a lesser, whatever his operating lease, financing lease will apply, but MNO will account it as being a part of lessee. Let us write down that in sentences. Company MNO has a right to obtain substantially all economic benefits of the asset. What are those? Which are electricity produced, that is the units of those asset produced, units produced by the assets, and even others such as renewable, what is the something they have, renewable energy credits. Other benefit, which is tax credits. Tax credit is an element which is more related not with using the asset but with ownership of an asset. So using the asset is with MN only. So other benefit of tax credits relates to ownership and not use of the asset. Hence, MNO will account the arrangement as lease. To be specific, he is a lessee. both the books. You are having the books. Lessor is having the assets and he is having the benefit of receiving income from the assets. Lessee has the asset and he is using the asset and getting the benefit out of it. Both are assets. It is the one person enjoys the ownership benefit, other person enjoys usage benefits. It's like if I give the asset to you and you give the asset to somebody else, basically sublease. For you it is an asset taken, for both parties asset will be there. I will show the asset given to you, you show as asset given to others. Asset can be in two persons' books. It can be. Okay, remaining problems and other points we'll take it after the break. 7:30, 10 minutes, 7:40 will.